Hello, everybody. I feel like somebody says that on their YouTube channel, so I apologize if I just stole that from you. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. It is me, Hey Archer. Thank you for watching. So, don't forget, if you like these videos, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell down below, get notified when new videos come out, because tons of videos come out. And you know on this channel, we're always talking MMA and nerdy stuff. And it seems like every time I'm done with MMA and UFC, they find little ways to just, you know the line. You definitely know the line. Anyway, I was listening to my favorite Sunday evening show. You can see it there, maybe. Oh, now it's on. Now it's flowers that are on there. The Eugene S. Robinson show. The show Stomper, which I love. And he's one of my favorite MMA. I don't know. Eugene, do you call yourself a journalist? An MMA journalist? Because apparently people that are MMA journalists don't consider themselves MMA journalists anymore. But that's beside the point. Actually, it's not. That's on topic for what we're going to talk about in this video. So, today, I am making just a quick video. I am going to title this one, In Defense of Ariel. And I'm talking not The Little Mermaid. I'm talking about the Nose, MMA Journalist of the Year. What, 6 times, I think they said, or 7 times? Ariel Helwani. Now, what has sparked this In Defense of Ariel video? The last video I put out, I believe, was the one where Luke Thomas was calling out MMA journalists for not asking tough questions and padding questions and that kind of thing. Padding might have been my own word, regardless. It was a video just saying that, you know, he doesn't consider himself a journalist anymore because he found himself not being a true journalist when interviewing MMA fighters, which, as he's pointed out, and even other people have pointed out, whenever somebody is asked tough questions, they usually, not usually, well, yeah, most of the time, they can get pretty defensive. And the second you ask them that tough question, I think my camera's askew here. There you go. By the way, you like the mustache? I do that every time I don't have work the next day. And if I feel like shaving, I just leave the mustache. My Tom Selleck. Anyway, so Luke Thomas was saying that he's not an MMA journalist because the journalists, you know, they don't ask tough questions that often in fear that they'll lose the MMA fighters. Now, in my video that I made, I commented that they should not worry about that because they are the ones that push these fighters more than they push themselves. So, yeah, there might be a downslope of people not coming on your show, but people would still listen regardless, especially if you're good at entertaining. So, Luke Thomas, for example, pointed out how he doesn't have a lot of fighters on his shows because a lot of fighters don't like him. And he doesn't mind it. And as a fan of Luke Thomas as well, it's funny because when you watch his YouTube channels and you watch him on like More Than Combat, which is his new show on the Below the Belt Network, which is weird to say there's a Below the Belt Network now. When you watch him, he's, you know, talking normal. And then all of a sudden, he's doing serious radio. When it's, hey, it's Luke Thomas. Welcome to my show. I have today Frankie Edgar. Frankie Edgar, how you doing, champ? You know, like, it almost changes, right? Which I'm not sure if that's related to him being on, like, Sirius and, like, a big network and all of that. Or if he truly just, when he sees an MMA fighter, the pitch changes, you know, like you're seeing a celebrity or something. I'm not sure. But, you know, when you're on like a major broadcast or major network or whatever, you have to put it on at a certain point. You just can't be casual, whatever, because you have now a higher power to pay. And that's why Luke Thomas is one of my favorites and Eugene S. Robinson, one of my favorites, because, you know, they do their own shows on the sides where they don't have to put on a face or something. So those are why I like those two guys a lot. But I'm coming back full circle here. So we've come back to Ariel Helwani. Now, I don't know about you guys, but Ariel Helwani has always been one of my favorite MMA journalists and still is till this day. And there's a lot of hate towards Ariel, which is understandable. Like he gets called Access Ariel and like the TMZ of UFC and all that kind of stuff. Which, yes, he has made videos, I guess you could say, that follow along those lines. But those are videos that we all ask to see. Those are videos that we want. We want the gossip. we go watch fights because of the gossip around the fights. If somebody tells you they like watching MMA because of just the fights, they're probably lying. And they're denying the fact that there are small portions of their interest that involve the drama behind the scenes. It's just human nature. You always want the dirt and all that stuff before a fight. So, something that Eugene brought up today, and something that a lot of people online have said is, that Ariel's fans are not necessarily real, or more along the lines of they're not genuine. Like, people just say they like him, but not really. That the UFC is paying him to say certain things and doing all of that. Let's go back a couple of years, right? When Ariel was out of Syracuse University and he's on the come up and he's trying to be a journalist, and it's, I believe, and Ariel, if you watch this video, you can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. The point of interest of journalism was the NBA and basketball, right? But through college and, the way that you just mix and mingle with everybody else, he was also a fan of boxing. He discovered MMA. I think it was if I remember an episode, I think it was like posters or something that he saw, and that like intrigued him to start watching it, whatever. But you fast forward, and Ariel starts doing journalism for MMA, and he gets on to various online shows. He was on the Fan House. Eventually, he was on. It was the AOL Fan House. I think he was on something else before he ended up starting the MMA Hour. But Ariel was essentially a fan first. And if you were watching Ariel from back then, you saw him on the come-ups. He was just that guy out of college doing the MMA Hour for an hour. I think it was even less the first episode. You can look it up if you want. But you saw him on the come-up. And one of the things that I liked personally about him, and that most people liked about him, was that he would ask interesting questions. And he wasn't just asking, hey, Alistair Overeem, are you training hard for this next fight? What's your key to victory? Like, he wasn't asking just stock questions. He would ask really interesting questions. Like, what's different about this camp versus last camp? What did you learn from your loss against this person? That kind of stuff, which is amazing, which is awesome. And that's why I became a fan. I'm pretty sure a lot of you became fans because of that too. So as Ariel starts to rise in popularity, he has the MMA Hour. The MMA Hour eventually blows up and becomes huge. It becomes the number one source for people to go to mixed martial arts. Now, let's take a pause for a second. And let's think about just life in general, right? As you progress in life, right? You're a poor college student, you're a poor high school student or whatever, you get used to a certain way of life. And as you progress in life, right, ideally, the goal is always to make more money. The goal is always to become more established in whatever it is you do. And as you grow, right, you start to serve different masters. And it becomes harder to say, okay, you know what, screw this, I'm going to start all over again. Start from scratch. If you're a single person, you can take those risks. I've taken those risks as a single person with no kids, no nothing, where I can just say, you know what, change of plans, we're doing something else, right? Once you bring a partner in, right? Once you start a family, once you start having kids, you start getting used to a certain way of life. And that baseline that you can be at starts to raise, and it raises. Now, the reason I mention this, right? And by the way, none of this is like I've talked to the man and I understand all of that, or like he's told me these things. It's just human nature, right? So as Ariel progresses and he gets more popularity and gains more popularity, he becomes the face of MMA fighting. You go from your small apartment in, let's say, Brooklyn. I'll take a guess because I know New York Rick is a Brooklyn boy. So let's assume that Ariel, much like a lot of people who went to New York in the early 2000s and was not a wealthy person, you moved to Brooklyn. Now Brooklyn's expensive, but he starts in Brooklyn, let's say. He's doing the MMA Hour. MMA Hour starts picking up steam. He starts making more money. Now he's got a bigger place. Now he's got his girlfriend. Now they decide they're going to get married. And then they decide they're going to have kids. that baseline of what you can do to survive financially starts to raise, right? So now the guy who is doing, being himself, doing the MMA Hour for Vox Media, all of a sudden UFC gets a partnership with Fox. And Fox is like, hey, we want the best journalists out there. Ariel Helwani, right there, right then and there. Take him in. They grab the man, and now everybody starts to wonder, will there start to be a conflict of interest, right? Because now he's working for the man. The man. Not Becky Lynch, the man. I mean the man. And so we're almost with him on this journey. We saw him in the small studio. Now he's big time. Now he's at Fox. All of a sudden, Dana White gets pissed off at him because he leaked I think that was Brock Lesnar DC. No, Brock Lesnar Mark Hunt. I think that was the story that got leaked or something like that. Dana White gets pissed at Ariel, says screw him, get him out of Fox, all that kind of stuff. That whole blow up happens. So as you're watching it, you're like, all right, as a fan, you're like, whatever. He's just going to be back to the MMA Hour, which is what we know him for. And eventually that other show, the MMA Beat. But for him, now he's got an additional paycheck coming in. He's got his Vox Media money. He's got his Fox money. And now all of a sudden, Fox is out. And now, not only is he out money, I'm assuming, but he's also, being told you can't credential and go to UFC fights anymore, which is his bread and butter. So there's a twofold there. His livelihood's being challenged, and not only the thing he loves to do, but his actual financial livelihood is being challenged. So he continues doing his thing with the MMA Hour, and his video of him, losing his shit when after the event goes viral in the MMA community, and Ariel's just back to being the face of MMA journalism again. Continues. Fast forward, UFC leaves Fox, and now the UFC's with ESPN, right? And this is the big time deal that they've wanted. This is the big time deal they've always wanted. And ESPN, who has already been investing little by little into MMA for a second time, because they did it before, but now it's second time, now they're not even just concerned with the UFC, now they're buying other organizations to air them too. They want to have their own MMA journalists, their own MMA shows. Let's get the best person out there. So who do we get? You get Ariel Helwani. And they get him to such an extent that he leaves Vox Media and does his whole thing with ESPN. So now, instead of having two masters again with a fallback, now we're all in on ESPN, right? And let's not forget, years have passed. Our baseline of what we can do starts to rise. Now he's getting options to go to the to the NBA, summer league and do commentary there. His dream, what he's always wanted to do. Now he's getting all these other opportunities to be on different shows and host or be part of a host or, be on a show where they're all watching the draft, like him and Rosenberg from Hot 97, right? So these guys, they're starting to multiply their hustle into other sports, not just the one. And then you get to a point where he's got masters now he has to listen to, because now we're used to something. We see the other opportunities that are out there. There's opportunities everywhere now if you're with ESPN for any sport. If your foot's in the door, you could be good, but you got to toe that line, because now, like I said, there is a master. And people like Brendan Schaub have said, Ariel, just do your own thing. You don't need a master, which I understand the concept for, but it's still not the same. At least not yet. Maybe it would be for him. Who knows? But for now, it's a sure bet to be with ESPN, to have that access to Disney and all these other sports leagues and all that. It's something that any journalist would dream for. Then we have our Connor McGregor interview, right? And this is a very controversial interview after the fact. Because as you watched it, if you did, and a lot of us have, it's one of those where you're just like, the tough questions are not being asked. And again, it is a lot of it does have to do with one topic in particular, but it's also one of those where a question's asked to Connor, Connor dodges it. The question is asked maybe a little bit differently the second time, Connor dodges it, and then it's dropped and we move on to another topic. And it's one of those where people were watching it and it felt very similar to the Dana White interviews on UFC YouTube channel, where you're watching this interview and you know that it's not a genuine interview. It just doesn't feel that way. Something feels off about it. To Ariel, he's got a job to do now. It's not just him doing some fanboy YouTube channel like this. He's got a job to do. He has people to provide for. He's got a career to look forward to. He's got a career outside of MMA that he wants to have. When they give you that call and they say, hey man, we're giving you that exclusive to Connor, even though you're the person that gave Connor his first shot at the mainstream in interview format, we're giving you this interview with Connor. Don't mess it up, you know? And it's one of those things where you just have to say, all right, you have to understand that there's certain things he can't do anymore. He's not just on the AOL, MMA. What was it? There was I think I used to go to the AOL website to the sports section, and then that's where you find MMA. Like, he's not doing that low end stuff anymore. He's big time now. He's working for the company. He's a company guy. If we're talking WWE stuff, it's like, he was DX, Triple H, and then all of a sudden he's working for Vince. You have to understand that it has to happen that way for him to reach his dreams and be what he wants, be who he wants to be and do what he wants to do. He has to transition into that. And when people say that he doesn't have true fans or that he's always been a company guy like that, it's not true. At least to me, it was never true. But I also understand that as he's risen, it gets to that point where you have to start towing the line. And who knows, all of this could be blown out of proportion. Connor might have said, I will only talk to you if you say X. Most likely it went through some third-party management or something, like his own managers or whatever. But there's a line that now you're on ESPN. Now you're on big network. You're not on YouTube anymore. There's certain lines you can't cross. Certain things you can't do. Because if you mess it up, right, starting from scratch. And once your family's depending on you and your kids are in schools and you're in a house and you're doing all these things, you can't take those risks anymore. And it's not his fault. And all of that could be, he could have the biggest side hustle that we don't know about. Just I think his brother has a clothing line. Ariel can have something going on that we have no idea about. But to get the shot to be on ESPN, you can't fuck it up. Once you get that, once your foot's in that door, you can't fuck it up. Because to start over, especially in MMA journalism, to start over and try to make a good buck with you being your own master, that's hard. That is hard. I don't care what anybody says. There are a couple people who have made it, but it's hard. And heck, he probably doesn't. I don't read the articles. I've never been one to read articles. I'm willing to bet he doesn't write as many articles anymore because he doesn't have to. If he starts all over again, he might have to start doing that again. And once you graduate from apprentice to a journeyman, just like in construction, you stop doing the grunt work. Now you're the face. I don't fault the guy. And I think a lot of us are harsh on him, but really if we all had all the same opportunities he did, if we all had that same hustle, that same grind like he did, we'd all follow the same exact steps. And if somebody tells you otherwise, they are lying. They are for sure lying. And that's the way it is. So, long-winded rant, but, at the end of the day, I personally have always thought Ariel was a stand-up guy because when I ran into him on random occasions, he remembered who I was. My cousin ran into him at a fight once, and he mentioned my name. He's like, oh, yeah, he watches the show. And, I've always viewed him as a man of the people, and New York Rick, too. New York Rick has always been super cool and, to me, a man of the people. So as these guys start to grow and develop, they're not the same person. It's anybody It's any fighter. Once you get domesticated, it's a whole new ball game. Once you're that fighter that's not fighting for 5-5, 10-10, once you start making that, 500,000 a show plus a bonus or guaranteed 700,000, you're not the same person anymore, and you can't fault them. You truly cannot fault them. So I don't know. I think that a lot of us have been hard on Ariel for this. I don't think it's all his fault. I think it is what it is. I'm sure he'll address that on this week's show. Maybe he won't. But I think we got to cut him a break. And yes, I do agree we have to keep asking the tough questions of people. But at a certain point, that person who you want to ask the tough questions, until they become their own master, they can't ask them anymore. It just can't happen. So those are my thoughts. I know it's a long video, but I have always been a fan of Ariel. I continue to be a fan of him. And I hope that us and you guys as MMA fans will cut him a break, cut him some slack, and just remember who Ariel was when he had nothing. And then maybe that will help you accept him for who he is now. Or maybe you just hate his guts, and that's fine too. I'm sure he has no issue with that. So thanks for watching. Don't forget, like, subscribe, comment. Lots of fun videos this week. We have the Mandalorian trailer. We're going to watch that together. There's a new Star Wars trailer coming out tomorrow. Right now, it's Sunday evening as I record this. So I think the Star Wars trailer is coming out tomorrow. We'll talk about that. And, of course, on Thursday, there will be a new YouTube How to Do It type. I got to find a cool name for that. And our 2-minute trailer on Friday. If you didn't watch last week's 2-minute trailer, I'll try to link it up above somewhere. And 2-minute trailer, 2-minute review. It's been a long day. I'm tired. I'll see you guys later.